Welcome to everyone joining us in our session today. And no doubt I'm definitely anticipating the outcome of this conversation. And there are many persons who are, for sure, who are looking forward to the various insights that we can gain from this discussion. So, welcome to everyone joining our session. So, as we seek to discuss and share insights into the subject of risk quantification and qualification in light of cybersecurity, and mainly focusing on risk quantification. Is it always a waste of time? Is it sometimes a waste of time? Is it always worthwhile investment of time? So those are some of the things that we will be diving into. But just a little bit of housekeeping for those who might be tuning into us is that feel free to ask questions, make comments, and of course, members of the panel will definitely be willing to um, provide their feedback on those questions. So, with that said, let me introduce the members of the panel. We have Brent Deterdin, Chief Information Security Officer, board qualified technology expert. And we also have Ido Gaynor of that's CISO tier. And we also have Carter, Chris Carter is a board's chair advisory CISO risk um, advisor as well. So welcome everyone. So Brent, you did a post some weeks ago, and that post triggered a number of views, opinions, very interesting views, comments in relation to what you had posted. So, can you take us through, that post itself?
Sure. So I am I'm a fairly new CISO. I've been in my seat for about a year, but I've been in cybersecurity for over 20. I worked for a vendor for 19 years, and in that time, I saw many thousands of different environments. And in my previous 4 or 5 years in the role, I was in sales, talked to a lot of CISOs, had an exposure to a lot of kind of thought leadership style discussions. And risk quantification versus qualification is definitely a big thing, right? A big issue. So I have when I came to my organization, I report to the CEO. We have about 10,000 employees, so not small by any means. And I kind of came to my board, and really not my board, my ELT, and I was like, "Hey, how do you want me to do this? Because I can do a lot of things, right? In terms of board reporting, in terms of metrics, in terms of risk qualification, quantification, all this. I have a lot of flexibility." And to a large extent, they were like, "Well, we don't know. So you tell us." And I said, "Well, my personal preference is to kind of start with a relatively simple example for us anyway, which is ransomware, and kind of work back from there. And I put numbers around it, right? So was I doing quantification? Not really, right? And so I went to my CFO and I was like, "Hey, what do you think of my numbers? When I say ransomware is a $15 million risk, which it is, we know from history and comparative data with similar companies and all this that 15 20 million bucks, it's about there." And he goes, "Well, Brent, I think your numbers are they're a bit fuzzy. They're a bit fuzzy." And I said, "They're a guess. Let's be very, very clear. They're a guess, but they are an educated guess based on some real things: our revenue, number of PII records, number of employees, historical data or data out there in the industry from the Verizon data breach report, the IBM Ponemon, all this kind of stuff. Like, and we know what ransomware cost us and other people, or what it has in the past for people like us. So it's a reasonable thing. So now here's a whole body of knowledge, a whole thing that I can do with risk quantification, right? And you dive in, I showed them a specific software package. You dive in, you do all the things, and you come out with a number that is more defensible. And my CFO's feedback to me, he said, well, if you need that to make a decision about where to invest, that's up to you. You go ahead. But I don't need it. I said, well, then you have to trust my fuzzy numbers, right? You have to trust my directionally accurate guess. I said, well, we're okay with that. I said, okay, that's fine. So for me and my org, I qualify risk in financial terms, right? And that was really the impetus of the post. Now, my approach is not the only one by any means, and this is a hotly debated topic. And so I love all the commentary, I love the conversation, and it's something that I don't think is settled. I think what I do works for me and my org, but it's not the only way to do things by any means. So I've talked to Ito, I've talked to Chris, I've talked to you, talked to all these people, and I love the discussion, because I don't know. I don't think there is necessarily one answer, but I'd love to hear what other people say.
Okay, great. Ido?
Yeah. So first, just to mention, in parallel to Cisoteria, I also manage a group of actually we are a 30 people company that provides CISO services locally here for 30 companies. So I know exactly what Brent is talking about, because every second day we are getting another CEO or financial asking, what, can you quantify our risk? And actually that's what led us to really found and create Cisoteria as a quantification platform. But I think that what Brent said, I totally in agreement. I think Brent and I have been discussing about it in the last few weeks ago. We find out that someone that is experienced in the industry, when I enter a company, I ask them 10 questions, I immediately know their status, I immediately can quantify the risk. So no question that someone professional which has experience in the industry is able to quantify risk. And I think that one of the things which I think we all agree in this forum, although there are many in outside of this forum probably, that quantifying risk in financial terms, it's key, it's necessary. We do not need to keep on quantifying risk with technology measurements, but we need to do it with financial metrics. So in regards to that, that's something to follow and to remember. Now, I do agree that what's God's feeling of myself or Brent or someone experienced, it's probably very well and close to the reality. No question about it. Because this experience, this is what's God's feeling. It's experience, and experience comes out of day-to-day hard work for many years. No, that's the truth. That's the fact. But on the other end, we do need to keep on that and remember that first of all, not everyone is experienced. As Brent, maybe I would dare to say about myself as well, not everyone has 20, 30 years of experience and is able to quantify risk, number one. Secondly, not every CFO will agree to my gut feeling or to Brent's gut feeling. So sometimes yes, but not everyone would agree to that. So this is part of why there is a need there is a need to quantify risk on the day-to-day. And I think that and we need, and that's what we are doing and hoping to do with Cisoteria. And again, it's not a matter of me kind of selling Cisoteria, but the idea with Cisoteria is really to be able to quantify the risk and track it 24/7, not just once in 3 months or once a year. Our concept is really, let's follow it 24/7, and let's also look at the trend. And what do I mean by trend? Because we are doing, we have the inherent risk and we have the residual risk. We would like to watch the residual risk on an ongoing basis. So this way we can see if our activities reduce the residual risk or increase the residual risk. How does it influence? These are the matters that we need to follow. And I don't think there is no disagreement between, the gut feeling of quantification is absolutely. So first, I think we all need to agree there's a need for financial risk quantification, number one. And number two, is let's see how we can do with this the best and how we can follow up on it for 24/7. That's my take on this. And I really, by the way, I was really happy to read and see Brent's message because first of all, the idea of having a discussion about risk quantification, that's great, and financial risk quantification, because the problem of most of the industry, they do not speak financially. The
Right.
CISOs speak, the CISO speaks technology, but instead of speaking to the management with financial terms, with terms that the executive management understand. That's, in my opinion, part of the major problem in the industry. Management is disconnected because no one speaks their language.
Yeah. So I have to butt in here and mention Rob Black owns the company Fractional CISO, and he has these hysterical videos where he like does a video against himself, right? And he poses as the CFO, and he's like, "Well, what do you need your budget to be next year?" And it's like, as a CISO, it's like, "I need it to be very high." You're like, "Well, why?" Because the risks are very high. It's like, well, what chance of the Eagles winning the Super Bowl? They have a medium chance of winning. Like, this does not work in life, right? Like you can't go to your CFO and be like, I need a very high budget. Like, that didn't work, right? So now, like, what I also tell is that humans in general, but CISOs specifically, it's kind of two things, right? On one hand, we're absolutely terrible at risk quantification, right? People are afraid to fly, but not afraid to drive to the airport, right? So that's one aspect, right? The other aspect is that if you go to a room full of CISOs and you say, hey, what is the most cost-effective thing that you can do to reduce risk? Every single person will say MFA. Every single one, right away without hesitation. Why do we know that? We all know that that is the best bang for the buck, the most cost-effective risk reduction, because we know it's cheap, it reduces risk a lot, no one does it, it's boom, there, right? So on one hand, as humans, we're terrible, but on the other hand, like on some things, like it's really, really obvious. And so I like to say significant risk reduction is simple, easy, and cheap. Simple is a technology statement. Easy is a people process statement. Now, as humans, we tend to make simple things hard, but that doesn't mean it has to be, right? And in the grand scheme of things, cheap, right? I don't need to spend a ton of money on a bank vault for a front door if I leave all my windows open, right? And it's not even so much that, because the only people who are going to take advantage of that are targeting me specifically. It is more like I don't need to build a bank vault for a front door while I leave my car running in the garage with the door open all night, every night. Like that's more. So a lot of basic things help. So the reason I point this out is I think for me, where I might get more interested in doing the work for more defensible quantification is actually after I've done a lot of other stuff. Like, I don't necessarily need to spend any time or effort quantifying the risk to justify MFA and EDR and patching and things like this. Like, just do those things. And then after you've done those things, okay. Because I can easily say what ransomware risk is to my organization. Can I say what the risk is of doing some specific project that is going to open up some specific API to the world? I don't know. That's hard, right? That's a much harder thing. And for that, my gut feeling may not be good enough. So I think after you've done a lot of basics, there's a lot of opportunity for more detailed quantification. Ida, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you that there is basics, no question. You correctly put, when I get out of the car, I close the car, I shut the windows, and I take the keys with me. No question. There are certain things that you need to do as a starting point. Where starts the problem? The problem starts with processes and people. What do I mean by processes? Today, with technology, many people are actually doing mistakes. Let's take, for example, I always like to give a very simple example. Let's assume that in our firewall, Rule 24 is any, and anyone outside of the company can penetrate the company and do whatever they want on the local network, on the internal network. Just assume that. Okay. Now, why is that there? You would correctly say it's because a human person just specifically this vulnerability practically. This rule, any, it's a vulnerability that someone, maybe the firewall implementer in the IT security team actually did this vulnerability. But the question is, so if I will tell this person, hey, you see rule 24, you need to fix this rule, it's any, you need to close it. So, and then he will go ahead and close it. But what happens? What happens is we actually dealt with the symptom, not with the root cause. The root cause is the process. Is there a procedure for updating firewall rules? Is this procedure is well written and well deployed? Is there a person other than the person that is in charge of the firewall that audits the follow of procedure of this person once in 3 months? Once you'll close the process, then you'll close the problem that people create. And now, why do I raise this? Because this is all relates to the quantifying of the risk at the end of the day. Because as long as processes will not be dealt properly, then human will continue to put errors and mistakes in their work, because we are human. We are all making mistakes. That's something that we all do by definition. So the idea is that what I'm actually in belief is that we need to do the basics, no question, but we need to have processes that will complement the basic and make sure that we do it properly, because that's the root cause of the issue. The issues of the processes being done well. Last point about that, you know, I was participating a few weeks ago in a conference, a CyberTech conference, and there were, I think, hundreds of companies there. And I was thinking for myself, this whole industry is ridiculous. There are so many money, and there is now $25 trillion is being poured into technology, more and more technology, more and more startups. And what you would expect that with so much money, the threats will go down, the risks will go down. And no, the risk goes up, the threats goes up. So something doesn't work.
What were our major problems in cybersecurity 30 years ago? Patches and passwords, right?
Yeah.
Have we improved a whole lot, right? Jamil Farshall from Equifax just did the Bipartisan Policy Center 23 cyber risk, and he commented and he said, hey, you know, like, we could have issued this report in 2003 as well as 2023. Like, we, by a large extent, we haven't. And to your point, that's why I say significant risk reduction is simple, easy, and cheap, right? Simple is technology. Easy is people process, right? And we tend to make these simple things hard, but that doesn't mean they have to be, right? They frequently can be easy. And a big part of that is just kind of pointing out and saying, let's do the easy way, right? Let's hit the easy button. And it's I don't say that lightly or flippantly, but in many environments that I've seen and operated in, that was very possible, right? It's very like, well, let's just not do it that way then. Well, but I don't care. Let's just not do it that way anymore. Let's fix the problem and fix the process, to your point. And it works. It doesn't always work. I mean, there are toxic environments out there, but I think it works a lot more than it doesn't. I'll say it.
And focusing on the processes, this is exactly where, when you focus on the process, then you are able to quantify the risk financially, because from the process you can learn about the technology. One of the things that I know what's the status of the firewall without connecting to the firewall and without even looking into the firewall, just by watching the processes which relates to the firewall.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah. So here's a funny story. So when I was on the sales side, right? So I worked for a company. We caught bad guys early in the kill chain. That was our thing, and we did it better than virtually anyone else. And but it was funny because occasionally, and this is pre-COVID, you'd have the meeting, right? And then afterwards, you come down for the office, and you're sitting there with the sales guy and the regional director in the lobby, and I would say, hey man, make sure to give them the incident response hotline, because they're owned. They don't know it yet, but I can, without ever touching the network, I can tell you with very little doubt, they're owned. And remarkably, very often I was right. Within 3 months, within 6 months, it's like, oh hey, we're in there. It's like, oh yeah, oh why are we? Oh, IR just went in. I'm like, I told you, right? Just by talking to the people, just by observing the environment, watching the interaction, and it was uncanny how with hundreds of data points, you really get a very good gut feel of the technical environment based solely on talking to the people. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh hey, I bet I know what you're doing. I bet I know what your problems are, right? And it works. It works to your point. Exactly. You can watch the process and the people and tell a lot about the technical environment. That's absolutely the case. Chris, do we have you on yet?
Yeah, we're here. I'm here.
Oh, sweet. Well, we've been talking. Chime in here.
No, so I
Yeah,
think
awesome.
it's follow you on LinkedIn. I love your comments. I love the energy. So it's a pleasure to be here to discuss the topic of cyber risk quantification with you. Actually, in my previous role, I was on the client side. Now I'm on the vendor side. And as a client, one of the things that we've always talked about, and I'm privileged to come from. I'm very fortunate to come from a very mature organization, and this was one of the couple things we agreed on, though, right? In addition to everything that you've said, we have to some of the challenge we were having is we did not have a common language risk. So large organization, you have operations in APAC, all around the world, right? You have to be able to communicate your risk in a language that is consistent and meaningful. The second point is you talk about going to the board, and I love your approach because it's very I have a 25% chance of realizing $100 million risk to put up $1 million to solve the problem, right? The board understands that they can fly. The third is, I think, from a regulatory perspective, not always coming up. Boards are regulators are starting to organizations to have framework that provides and articulates clarity. Again, from a large organization, if you need to transfer risk, right, you got to be able to think about, am I going to buy a piece of tech people either to implement a process or to run the makes more business sense. So I think those are some of the things, right? And of course, people, process, and technology, and the risk associated with all of those entities. You need some semblance of risk quantification. But I think we're not, as a group, but as an industry, we're not quite there yet. We're making strides. I've seen models over complicated the process where you have to go this 40 months later, you're still trying to figure out how much is it going to take? Buy a firewall, go to an MSSP, or just buy insurance, right? Those are the things that I think, and you want to move judiciously at the speed of business, you have to be able to make those rational. So there you have it. Jump in.
This is probably a comment for another podcast, but I don't like frameworks at all. Not even a little bit. But here's my snarky reason why. My snarky reason why is that by the time I can find a vendor and pay however much money to have a NIST assessment done, I can buy YubiKeys and have them rolled out for half the money and half the time, right? So which organization do you want protecting your data? The organization that said, hey, I'm going to roll out YubiKeys in the next 3 months. Or the organization said, well, we're going to sit around and we're going to do NIST assessment and see where we sit. I roll out YubiKeys. Roll out YubiKeys, do all that stuff. If then I have to do a NIST assessment for compliance reason, I go, shit, well, I got to pay taxes. I got to do a NIST assessment. I got to do pen tests. I got to whatever. That's sunk cost. I can't do anything about that. So done. So I think that there's great value in moving quickly, right? And moving quickly in the basics, right? That's why I have 4 hills that I'm willing to die on as a CISO, right? 100% MFA coverage, 100% device posture management, which is like my device to connect to my network, 100% EDR coverage, and 100% patching on everything externally within 72 hours, right? I live and die by those 4 hills. I will push all my chips across the table for those 4 things. After that, it's all negotiable, right? And what I find is that mitigates a whole lot of risk. That's why I say significant risk reduction is simply easy and cheap. But what it also enables me to do is it enables me to, even in non-financial terms, right? I go to my board, I go to my ELT, and I say, what's bad look like? And I say, well, more than 2 days downtime for the call centers is that's too much. Okay. Because so for me, I have no intellectual property. There's a lot of things I don't have. But what matters to me, to my organization, is keep the call centers up and working. If the call centers stay up and working, we make money. If everything else in the company goes away for a week, it's not great, but we survive, right? And so there's a material impact, but there's also like, make sure the call centers stay up. Okay, cool. I can do that. That way I know anything that doesn't impact us that much, we can deal with. It's okay. At that point, it's all about like, well, example, I get free red team assessments every couple weeks from one level below nation state level adversaries. Give me a free red team all the time. And I love it because we identify and contain it quickly. We plug short-term little nitnoid holes, right? And it validates my long-term roadmap. So it's really kind of easy because it's like, all right, so the risk is call centers going down, right? The likelihood is very, very low. And I can prove that because I get nailed by these high-end adversaries on a regular basis. So what we're doing is pretty darn good, right? And I have to look pretty hardcore at any new control, any new process, any new thing I want to do. It's like, hey, we're doing pretty good. So is this justified spend, right? And that's really what I always have to ask. So one question that I do in the MFA gut feel kind of category is I go to my team, I go to myself, I go to vendors, I go to whomever, and I say, tell me a plausible story where not doing this costs my organization money, right? Or I might put it a different way, and I go, hey, listen, I know what our cyber insurance costs. I know all this. So tell me a story where we lose more than $5,000, or I'm sorry, $5 million, or $1 million, or whatever the number is, right? whatever would be a big deal to your organization, in like tell me a story where the call centers go down for more than 2 days. Tell me a story where we lose more than $1 million. Tell me a story where not having this costs us money. Right? These are very useful conversations, and I have them with myself. I have them with my team. I have them with my vendors. And I go, when I talk to the CFO, or I talk to the CEO, or I talk to the guy who runs help desk, or I talk to the database administrator of massive quantities of data, and I say, hey, tell me where the bodies are buried. Like, how could we breach 1 million records? Tell me a story. Let's figure it out. And I guess technically that's threat modeling, right? But I think there's a lot of value in informal conversations to gut feel quantify risk or qualify it, whatever. But I mean, either way, it's like, what's going to cost me? And if I knock down all those things, if I say, okay, that's not plausible, that is, and we did this and all this, then I'm pretty good.
But let me interject, because I'll tell you where I fully agree with all of the elements you mentioned. There is one but to that,
Yes.
And the but is, we should look at the risk 24/7, because technology and vulnerabilities and the hackers are the adversaries. They are dynamic. Everything is dynamic, including our people. So you have an EDR installed. Perfect. That's what you requested. But a day later, the EDR provider announced a new vulnerability that this EDR is totally vulnerable. And this immediately, in real time, impacts your risk quantification just over a second, because they just announced and found that they have a critical bug. So that's exactly the point where we were looking to have something that will be able to watch 24/7 on my risk and be able, because all what you mentioned, I agree with you. That's the practice, the ongoing practice to do. That's what we've been doing also for many years. But the part that we've felt that is missing is the ability to look and watch and track the risk 24/7. So whenever someone does a mistake, a person, whenever there's a new vulnerability. Yesterday there was a breach of a checkpoint firewall in Singapore, and this has been through a tremendous. This breach was caused because of lack of a certain practice that should be implemented. You want to know it on real time. You want to see how it impacts your risk, your financial risk in real time, and get an alert saying, hey, there is a new risk that your risk just got higher from 50 to 70, which cost you, instead of 5 million, potentially 10 million, and you want to know it in real time. That's the part that I think that complements all what you have been mentioning in regards to the day-to-day activities.
Yeah, I think in terms of sequencing, right? Brent talks about, well, he doesn't like framework. That they can be annoying, they can become pedantic at times, but I think depending on how you do want to have, a business impact assessment, right? Have plug those gaps, but as the organization grows and become more organization, at the same time the threat landscape is changing, right? Things happening at the same time, regulatory requirements happening, and growing regulatory requirements. I think is a need for us to mature. So the more mature you are along that maturity, you're going to need to have that ongoing risk assessment, right? Just like you said, and need to know that because things happen in the environment, right? So you've plugged all the gaps around the cultures. For some reason, there's an exposed, there's a database exposed wild, and somehow there's lateral movement. They come in, and we didn't know that because we didn't, right? Having the ability to identify those assets, and then and using the NIST, right? Identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, right? I think risk quantification to have that conversation using the same language, because again, if you're jurisdictions regionally, you're going to need to have a common language. You're going to know why a decision needs to be taken. So I think what Brent is saying, and I think you're both saying the different things, but they do, depending on where you are along that maturity scale, right? The basics needs to be covered. But as you mature, you have the appetite, and you have the budget, and you have the time, and you're board and convince your leadership, absolutely run with it if they're going to pay for it. With it.
Yeah. Another thing, I don't actually care all that much for asset inventories either, by the way, but it's a different story.
Wait, whoa, time out.
I know. So here's the deal.
Let's talk about that.
Sure. I don't mind having an asset inventory. I have one, but I don't start with it. So, for example, I'm big on 100% EDR coverage, right? Okay. So if you go, I can ask 4 different people around the organization, how many assets do we have? How many endpoints that could run my EDR tool? And I get 4 different answers, right? Okay. So
actually 50 different answers.
Yeah, probably, right? So I go to my team and I go, hey, we have these things have APIs. So pull asset list from the EDR, pull asset list from Microsoft AD, pull asset from vulnerability management, compare all of them, find the white space between them, and go put our EDR tool or our vuln scan or whatever on any white space. Sorry, my device is going off here. Sorry. So I find the white space between all of those, and I got to do that. So at the end of the day, do I have a pretty good asset inventory? Yeah. Do I care about it? Not really. What I care about is EDR and vulnerability scanner coverage. That's what I care about. I care about authenticating my devices. I care about authenticating my people. But I do that with the conditional access policies, this scripting. It works, right? So that's why I have an asset inventory, but I don't start with it. I don't even care about it all that much. I got to provide regulators an asset inventory, I'm sure, but I don't care.
So Brent, you have actually opened up an entire can of worms as relates to your approach. I mean, it's somewhat unorthodox in terms of how we actually think of risk, asset inventory frameworks. We have totally flipped the script in terms of what is normally.
I'm not saying I'm right, by the way.
No, we definitely get it. So that is definitely something that we would definitely want to probe more in terms of that way you assess, put forward your thought process. But listening to all that has been said, yeah, go ahead.
I think I have a post dropping on LinkedIn tomorrow, I think, that is one of my things that I say it, and a room full of CISOs will kind of scoff. They kind of laugh at me because it's about automatic patching. So that's fun. I'm kind of entertained when I go to a conference or whatever, and I say something, and everyone goes like they audibly laugh at my ass. I'm like, well, okay, let's talk. Like, I'm not saying I'm right, but I have reasons for thinking what I think, right? So these are great discussions.
Yeah, I would like you mentioned assets, but to me assets, and that's a transition that I've made with myself, are not technology assets, business assets. Pricing data, intellectual property. These are the assets because we need to speak the language with the executives, and they care about business assets. They don't care about computers, machines, firewalls. They have no idea. They don't care about it. So we need to translate, and this is where the coverage that Brent was relating to That's what's important, the coverage, but again, not of the technical assets, but of the business assets.
I completely agree. I actually, my business asset inventory is much more important to me, dramatically more important to me than the technical assets. So business assets, what data we have where, and what's important to the business, that's foundational, very, very critical. Totally agree.
Yeah, and to that you translate with the risk quantification financially. So taking the business assets and translate them. So now if you know that your intellectual property can be outside, you can lose confidentiality of your intellectual property, that means X amount of dollars you're going to lose out of it. So now you can translate it to financially, and that's what we need to do.
Yeah. I actually, before I came here, I interviewed with the company, and it was kind of funny because it was like, honestly, if we get ransomed and it costs 10, 15, whatever $1 million, I don't really care. Like, no one cares. That's a drop in the bucket. What we do care about a lot is our intellectual property, right? So, and then my organization, like confidentiality, integrity, like that's all fine. But availability is really the big thing, right? Because that's what impacts the business. So in terms of business assets, 100%, like that is way, way, way important. Like what machines I wear, I have it. I just don't care.
Yeah. In many cases, by the way, just and I had also a full session on that. I start with, let's define what's an asset and what's risk. And it starts with, an asset is not any server. An asset is a business asset, and the risk is not ransom. Ransom is not a risk.
Yeah,
it's
a
threat. It's a threat.
Yes.
Yeah, the risk, as you just mentioned, Brent, the risk is losing $10 million. That's the risk.
I know. It's fun. It may have been you on that thread. You were like, "Hey, that's a threat, not a risk." Come on, yes. I know this, but everyone knows what we're talking about. And so, like, if I go and I try to clarify or whatever, my CFO might go, "Yeah, but who cares? Like, quit being pedantic. I don't care." I'm like, "Okay, fine." So I just go with the risk. Kind of like, I don't really care if you call it information security or cybersecurity. Like, I'm not having that conversation. So, but yes, you are absolutely correct. It is a threat, not a risk.
The reason I put emphasis on that is because there was also, by the way, a few comments and discussions in different posts in LinkedIn, which again, it might be worth having another discussion about a tech CISO or a business CISO.
Oh,
there was a full discussions. There are many discussions I've seen around this area. Now, part of the problem is that technical CISOs, when you ask them about assets, when you ask them about risks, they speak technology. Now, then they complain that the executive management is not resonating with their problems. Of course they're not, because we are speaking different language.
Right. Yep, 100%. 100%.
Yeah,
that one up pretty good.
And for sure,
Chris,
that's where.
Chris, you didn't talk very much, Chris. What else do you
have
to input?
I'm listening. I think it's a conversation. I do think for your organization, is a top organizations. For example, the one I just came from, right? Confidentiality. We didn't have it. We sold a promise, not a product. So the aspects had different terms of importance and priorities. Bringing it back to cyber risk, it gets really interesting because kind of mentioned, okay, what's the definition of an asset? Is anything that impacts the business, right? Whether it's a ping or it could be intellectual, all of those things. How do you protect those in the hands of a bad actor? That's what I'd love to talk more. Ensure that we have there in place to measure the impact of any one of those compromised.
Yes, it is. You're absolutely correct. I think that this is exactly where we need to focus on. And again, I would bring the 24/7 because it's not just a one-time shot once a year or twice a year. It's an ongoing matter that you want to quantify the risk, to see what prevents. When you are focused on the assets and the risk that the executive management speak, then you get the buy-in of the management. You get also their accountability. And now they are part of the whole process. So it's not only you by your own
And you
trying to fight against the world.
Yeah. Well, this is all great. I think questions and Brett, to your point, Brett. I think when you said sometimes you say things, usually when that happens is you're on a lot of people, right, throughout history, heard ideas, right? It's Black History Month. We talk about Martin Luther King. He had some rad work, right? But look, he held his ground, and so I think these wild, right, in air quotes, you may be onto something. One of the is because one of the challenges we all are CISOs alike. Can the CISO speak the language of the business? You're taking a more business when it comes to managing your cyber risk. To you, man, you have some crazy ideas, but eventually over time, as people get you, we need to look at things through the lens of if not a security executive, crazy after all.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that I'm right and everyone is wrong by any means, but I am saying that I have reasons for my approaches and what I believe. And what I really love is I love when people push back or say, yeah, I'm not sure about that, because that gives me a lot. Like, I like that. I like rubbing up against different ideas, right? Ido has given me awesome stuff to think about. Like, okay, hey, that's all fun, good, but do we need to do this 24/7? And how do we do that? Do we need to? Don't we need to? I don't know. It gives me a lot to chew on, a lot to think about. I posted about my cyber insurance premiums went down by a third this year, and they were not high before. That's awesome, right? I love that. Why is that? I don't know. So as a result of that post, I got to talk to underwriters, people who own cyber insurance companies, cyber insurance brokers. I got to talk to all of them in detail to understand, oh, well, why did this happen? Was it just luck, or why is it? And then I take that back, and that forms some more opinions, right? And then I throw those opinions out, and people beat them up, and we go, okay, well, maybe I'm wrong, right? So I think as long as we are all open to changing our opinion and changing our approach, that I don't shy away from the discussion, even if I'm completely wrong, because that's how we all get better. And at the very least, I have a unique perspective, right? My perspective came from 19 years on the vendor side, right? Seeing thousands of organizations, being involved in the sales cycle. Now I'm a CISO. I talk to a whole lot of other CISOs from all across the world doing a whole lot of stuff. I talk to a massive number of vendors. So I have a fairly unique perspective, right? I don't know anyone else who came from the vendor sales side to be a CISO. So
but Brent, I can point because I'm a CISO of 30 companies and I'm also a vendor. So
yeah, right. I know. That is cool.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. We need to have such discussions more and more. I think that we need to bring to the table the issue of the business and understanding that if we want, I call it to cross the chasm. I always believe you're probably familiar with the Crossing the Chasm book, which is an amazing book, which has been my Bible for the last 30 years. and in high-tech security and all the rest. Now, in my opinion, our whole industry, as I mentioned before, it's ridiculous, and it did not cross the chasm. Why? Because exactly the issues we are talking. Very, very few quantify risk. Fewer than that even quantify 24/7. That's part of why we've come up with Cysoteria and so forth. So this is part, and the focus on processes. Now, just to reflect on the comment I've seen, one of the users there has been saying about the business assets. I did not say, and I do not believe that you do not need at all. Again, maybe Brent thinks differently, but that you don't need to know your assets, to know what assets, meaning technical assets. Of course, you need to know which computers you have on your environment. But when you speak to the management, when you make priorities, it's based on the risk quantification, the financial risk quantification that your management cares about, and not your technical people. And that's the point.
Yep. And I'm not anti-asset inventory. I'm just anti-starting with it. Like, I have it. I just don't think it's all that. Technical asset inventory, business asset inventory, 100%. Big deal. 100%. What machines? And the reason I don't care, or the reason I have the inventory, but I don't care that much, is because I have the preventative control. You're not connecting to anything I have unless you're on my device, and you're who you say you are, right? So therefore, like, if a box is on my network, it can't connect to anything of any significant value, right? And the likelihood of a physical device dropping on my network is relatively low in the first place. Like, there's some matters that I've accepted.
By the way, when we get into a new company, we do both. We start with the business assets, and then we understand where are and what are the technical assets, and we relate between them. We say, okay, let's see these business assets, this data, where it resides, in which technical assets. By connecting the two, now we can see whether we are putting the correct defense layers or not. So again, the start and the important part is the business assets. Of course, at the end of the day, we need to do the technical job, and we do need to make sure that the EDR covers all of our environment and so forth.
And, I probably should mention this as well. In a different environment, I would probably care more about the technical asset inventory. But I'm not defending another environment. I'm defending my environment. So a lot of what I say is for my environment, for the environment I'm in right now, right? Different environments.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's really what it comes down.
I mean, like, so the counterpoint to that is that since the early 2000s, I've heard how many people say that their environment is a special, unique snowflake, right? Incredibly unique and very difficult and very special. And it's like, oh, and having seen thousands of environments, you're like, oh, you have a whole lot of Windows machines and a couple Linux? Shocking, right? But no joke. So, like, take something like an external attack service, right? My external attack service is very, very easy, very simple. I'm down, right? If I work, but like, I talked to a CISO the other day who said, yeah, on Tuesday, we found a company that we didn't know we owned. Holy cow. Like, that would scare me. Like, if that is the environment I'm in, I care a whole lot about external attacks.
And by the way, we connected this company to our network.
Yeah, 2 years ago. And I was like, whoa. No. No. Like, that's like, I'd be, different environment, right? Do I care about asset inventory, external attack service in that kind of environment where I might just find a company we bought 2 years ago? Yes, a whole lot, right? So different environments make different things. Now, do I still, is like ideal, like, technical asset inventory, whatever. Maybe that's ideal. Maybe that's what I have. But yes, I hope I need to do a better job at clarifying this. I hope that no other CISO feels like I'm calling their baby ugly. I am not saying anyone else is wrong. I'm not saying that anyone else's environment is the same as mine and different. Not saying that at all. Now, the only counterpoint is that like environments are more similar than different, but like different environments, different criteria, right? 100%. I need to do a better job at clarifying that because otherwise people are going to think that I'm saying that they suck, and I'm not saying that at all.
So definitely, guys. Yes, Ido.
Yeah, just want to close. Me either. Everyone has his own experience, and again, everyone knows and does. And there's a lot of actually. If I'm looking 10 years ago, when there were probably tens of CISOs, today there are thousands of CISOs, and there are also CISO courses and so forth, and everyone is aware. I think that one of the things that we should, and this session helps, is help CISOs move towards more to the business side and start speaking with the management and start speaking, quantifying risk. I think we started off by saying we need to quantify risk financially, number one. Then whether we do it 24/7 or not, that's a second discussion, but we need to do it. We need to start speaking with the management. Only this will really, in my opinion, will make change in this industry, because we do need to have a transition, in my opinion.
Sure, guys. So quite awesome discussion, insightful, so many areas, avenues of discussion that no doubt persons are definitely want to gain further insights on in terms of all that has been said. And I definitely look forward for us to dive into further aspects of this discussion, because there's so much as it relates to risk quantification and also changing the mindset and the culture within the organization. Speaking from a GRSP perspective, creating that culture, creating that governance to break down those silos so that the communication from the top down is understood in light of the business and the risks that are trying to mitigate and implement all those relevant controls. So if are there any further words from you, Brent or Edo or Chris?
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
So awesome, guys, and we look forward to
It's a
many
pleasure.
more.
Take it
So
easy.
guys, have a wonderful
Thank you
rest of
all.
the day.
Good discussion. Thank you.
Great.
Bye.
Yes.